r/NoSleep. The midnight shift and the man with the glass eye. Working the graveyard shift at an all-night gas station, you learn to live with the weird and the creepy. Most of the time, it's just the usual oddities, the college kids tanked on cheap liquor, the truckers with hollow eyes fueled by caffeine and exhaustion, or the lonely regulars who talk too much about nothing. But sometimes, you get the kind of story that sticks with you, that you don't share because you know no one will believe it. This happened about 2 winters ago, on a night where the snow piled up against the glass doors and the fluorescent lights inside hummed loud enough to make my teeth ache. It was a quiet shift, the kind where you could count every second by the rhythmic tapping of the slush against the windows. I was scrolling through my phone when the automatic doors wheezed open. He stepped inside, a tall man bundled in a worn-out coat. What caught my attention, though, was his eye, or lack of one. A glass eye, dull and cracked, sat in the left socket. His real eye darted around the store with a nervous energy. I gave a half-hearted nod, the usual "can I help you?" expression plastered on my face. He didn't respond. He walked with stiff, mechanical steps towards the coffee machine and began filling a cup. His movements were slow, almost calculated, like he was pretending to be human and hadn't quite figured it out yet. I looked away, pretending not to care, but something about him set off warning bells in the back of my mind. Cold out there, I tried to sound casual, more to break the silence than anything. He didn't turn to me, but his mouth twitched into a half-smile. "A long night ahead," he said, his voice hollow and distant. It sent a chill up my spine. The bell on the door jingled again, and I felt relief flood my veins. A young couple stumbled in, their laughter loud and tipsy. They were oblivious to the tension in the room as they made their way to the snack aisle. I glanced at the man with the glass eye. He was watching them now, his good eye tracking their every movement. The cracked eye stayed fixed, staring blankly in my direction. I shifted uncomfortably behind the counter, fingers brushing the edge of the panic button. The couple came up to pay, giggling as they fumbled for their cash. I smiled, made small talk, my voice trembling just a bit. They left, their laughter fading into the cold wind outside. The man's coffee sat forgotten on the counter, untouched. He hadn't moved. He was looking at me now, one eye glistening with something dark, the glass eye reflecting the fluorescent light like a dead star. "You ever see something you're not supposed to?" he asked suddenly, breaking the silence. His question didn't make sense, but it came out so matter-of-fact that I felt my mouth go dry. "No, man," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "Not really." He chuckled, a guttural sound that made my stomach twist. "Good," he whispered. "Good." He reached into his coat, and for a second, I thought this was it. Robbery? Worse? I tensed, my hand slipping under the counter for the pry bar I kept for emergencies. But he didn't pull out a weapon. Instead, he placed something small and metallic on the counter. It was a pocket watch, old and ornate, the kind you might see in an antique shop. The ticking filled the silence, louder than it had any right to be. "Ticket," he said, nodding toward the watch. "I'm good," I replied, my voice shaky now. "Ticket," he repeated, and this time, his voice was sharp, commanding. His real eye was wide, unblinking, while the glass one glared at me like a dead thing. I reached out, almost against my will, and my fingers brushed the cold metal. A sudden pain shot through my temples, blinding white and searing. I gasped and staggered back, clutching my head. The room spun, the fluorescent lights flickered, and for a moment, the world felt wrong, too bright, too loud. When I blinked, the man was gone. The doors hadn't opened, no bell had jingled, but he was just gone. The pocket watch was still there, ticking away like it always belonged. The sound was no longer deafening, but it echoed in my head, relentless and rhythmic. I stared at it, afraid to touch it again. The rest of the shift was a blur. I called my manager, making some excuse about feeling sick and needing to leave early. I didn't tell her about the man or the watch. I couldn't. Who would believe me? The next day, I learned the couple who had come in that night never made it home. Their car was found abandoned on the side of the road, doors open, keys still in the ignition. No footprints in the snow, no sign of struggle. Just gone. And the watch? It's in my drawer at home, ticking away. I don't know why I kept it. Sometimes, when the house is quiet, I swear I hear a voice from the shadows, a hollow, distant whisper that asks, "You ever see something you're not supposed to?" I've learned not to answer. But not answering hasn't helped the fear fade. In fact, things have only grown worse. Nights at home feel different now, weighed down by a thick, Uneasy silence that seems to creep from the edges of the walls, pressing closer with each passing second. Sometimes, the watch's ticking is so loud I can't think. I tried stuffing it in an old shoebox, sealing it tight, but it was no good. The sound seeped through, slipping under the door and into my mind like a shadow I couldn't shake. A few weeks after that night, I started noticing things around my apartment, a shadow where there shouldn't be one, the feeling of eyes on me when I was alone, a faint smell of something rotting, lurking in the corners. Once, I caught a flicker of movement in my bathroom mirror and nearly knocked the watch off the counter in shock. Nothing was there when I looked again, but it left my nerves frayed, my mind buzzing with questions. One night, after I'd stayed up too late drinking to try to quiet the ticking in my head, I caved. I picked up the watch and stared at it, heart pounding in my chest. I'd avoided touching it since the night in the gas station, but I could feel it pulling me, demanding I confront whatever power it held. "What do you want from me?" I whispered. The ticking stopped. Dead silence filled the room, and in that silence, I swear I felt the world around me freeze. Then, slowly, I heard a voice, low, guttural, like the crunch of gravel underfoot. "You took something that wasn't yours." My heart raced, cold sweat beating on my forehead. "I didn't want it," I said, my voice trembling. "You gave it to me." "But you took it," the voice insisted, dark amusement lacing every syllable. "And now it belongs to you." I slammed the watch down on the table, backing away as if it might spring to life and bite. My skin prickled, every instinct in me screaming to leave, to run. But the door wouldn't budge. I tried the windows, too, nothing. I was trapped. Then the lights flickered, and I was no longer alone. Shadows pooled in the corners of the room, writhing and shifting. I saw shapes in them, faces, each twisted, hollow-eyed, mouths open in silent screams. Among them, a familiar face emerged. The young woman from that night at the gas station, her eyes wide and terrified, her mouth frozen in a silent plea. "You took it," she mouthed, barely a whisper but loud enough to make my bones ache. "He marked you." "What does that mean?" I shouted, clutching my head. But the shadows only swirled, muttering unintelligible things in a language that scraped against my mind like broken glass. Panic clawed at me, my heart thundering so hard I thought it might burst. "Why? Why me?" I screamed. A deep, hollow laughter echoed through the room. The man with the glass eye appeared in front of me, his cracked, lifeless gaze boring into mine. "Because you answered," he said, grinning. His good eye gleamed with something darker than malice. "You showed me you were listening. You let me in." He lifted a hand, and in it was another pocket watch, identical to the one he'd given me. I could hear it ticking, each tick resonating through my skull like a hammer striking bone. "This was never about the watch," he continued, his voice sinking to a whisper. "It's about the deal we made when you took it. I gave you a glimpse beyond the veil, a taste of the things that hide in the dark. And now you belong to them." I felt a pressure against my chest, as if invisible hands were pushing me down, pinning me to the floor. I gasped, trying to claw at the air, but it was useless. My vision darkened, the room spinning as the shadows closed in, wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. "You're ours now," he hissed, his face mere inches from mine. His cracked glass eye reflected my own terrified expression, my mouth frozen in a scream I couldn't release. In the days that followed, I lost all sense of time. The apartment was no longer mine. I barely slept, jumping at every creak, every shadow that stretched just a bit too far. The watch never left my side, ticking away, each second dragging me deeper into a suffocating darkness. I was haunted by nightmares, visions of hollow-eyed figures, voices calling my name from the shadows, the relentless ticking that followed me even into sleep. One night, out of sheer desperation, I took the watch to the river, intending to throw it as far as I could into the freezing water. My hands trembled as I held it over the edge of the bridge, the wind biting against my skin. But as I looked down, a cold realization washed over me. I couldn't let go. My fingers wouldn't release it, as if glued to the cold metal. My mind screamed, but my body betrayed me. The watch felt like a part of me, an extension of my own pulse. And then I heard it, his voice, whispering in my ear, soft as a breeze, yet cold as death. "Not yet," he murmured. "There's more for you to see." I stumbled back, clutching the watch to my chest as a wave of nausea hit me. My vision blurred, and for a brief moment, I saw something, a place shrouded in darkness, where time stood still, where shadows moved with a life of their own. I was standing at the edge of it, a vast emptiness that stretched forever, filled with faint whispers and glimmers of eyes watching, waiting. I stumbled back to my apartment that night, defeated, the watch ticking louder than ever. I knew then that this was my life now, a constant, creeping dread, the relentless ticking, and the knowledge that one day, he would come back to collect what was his. Now, I sit here, in the dim light of my apartment, writing this down as a warning. If you ever see a man with a glass eye, don't look too closely. Don't speak to him, don't acknowledge him. Because once you let him in, he never leaves. The watch is still ticking beside me, counting down each second, each breath. I know he'll be back one day. And when he comes, I won't be able to hide. I'll hear his voice in the darkness, feel his cold presence, and see that twisted smile as he drags me into the shadows where he came from. And when he does, I'll know it was never about the watch. It was about me.